Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon in Australia and this morning in Krakow in Poland. I'm Trudy Mitchell. I'm the CEO of Australia for Unhcr, and we really welcome everybody to this live update on the Ukraine crisis. Thank you so much to all of our supporters, our special representatives and our board members for joining us today. It's much appreciated. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that most of you are joining us from today in Australia. And I'd like to acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. So as I said, today I'm joining you from Krakow in southern Poland. It's 8 a.m. in the morning here. It's a beautiful day, which is great. We have Kevin Allen, who is UNHCR's representative in Poland, who will be joining us today. And I'm also joined by Yulia Gorbatova, who's sitting right next to me, who is working with the refugee community in Krakow as an associate community-based protection officer for UNHCR. And Yulia will share her story as she has come from Odessa in Ukraine to Poland and had to come here with her children, had to flee the situation there. During the webinar, you'll be hearing from Kevin and Yulia on the current crisis and the needs of refugees in Poland and also in Ukraine, and what UNHCR is doing to help. I've had the great fortune over the last few days to see the work of UNHCR, and it's been very impressive to see the response that we have had in Poland. And I've seen cash assistance, and also for me being up to speak with Ukrainian refugees, which has been really quite amazing. So if you have any questions as we go, we'd really like to hear from you. There's a Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. So if you want to put your questions in there, I can see them, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to get to as many as possible today. So we welcome your participation. We have an hour, we have a lot to get through, so we'll do the best that we can to get through any questions that you might have. So today we'll be talking about the Ukrainian situation, and it's amazing to think that Russia invaded Ukraine almost 8 months ago now, and it has sparked one of the largest displacement crises in the world today. Over 6 million people are displaced within Ukraine, and another 7 million, most of them women and children, and we'll talk about this today, have fled to Europe and European countries, and many are continuing on to other destinations. Poland is currently hosting 1.4 million refugees from Ukraine, more than any other EU country. Kevin Allen is UNHCR's representative in Poland, as I said earlier, and he has been in the country managing UNHCR's response. Kevin has worked with UNHCR for a very long time and has worked with Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh. He has worked in Afghanistan and managed the flooding situation. I think back in 2011, was it, Kevin, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, when that happened back then, as well as many other situations that Kevin's been in for UNHCR. So I'll start with you, Kevin. Can you give us a bit of an overview of UNHCR's initial response to the Ukrainian situation, and then just take us into what the current needs are today for refugees in Poland and how UNHCR is helping them?
Yeah, no, thanks, Trudy, and a big shout out to all the friends in Australia. I think at the outset, I just really have to acknowledge and appreciate how much support we've received from the Australian public, not just here in the Ukraine crisis, but also about a year ago with the Afghanistan situation. And over the years, just a lot of really fantastic support from civil society, from the private sector in Australia. So it's really a pleasure to reach out all the way from the other side of the globe in Warsaw and talk to our friends down under, as it were. So if we kind of go back in time to 24 February when this crisis broke out, I don't think anybody anticipated that the crisis would be as large and as rapidly developing as it turned out to be. And as you said, Trudy, Poland, of course, is a developed country. It's within the European Union. And in the early days, when we started to see people flooding across the border, the initial thinking was that the government of Poland and the people of Poland, which had really stepped up in an exemplary way, would be able to manage things in that initial phase. But it became clear as things evolved that what we were looking at was something bigger than we had seen since World War II. And the pace and the rapidity with which people were flooding across the border was really overwhelming. At one point, as many as 140,000 people in a single day crossing the border, just to give a sense of the scale. In those initial days, Trudy and friends and colleagues from Australia, the decision was taken to ramp up a large-scale cash program to assist people who were arriving, the vast majority, over 90% of whom were women and children. So already an inherent vulnerability, people who had in many instances fled with nothing but the clothes on their back and a few suitcases. So in that context, and knowing that Poland had not yet been able to fully ramp up its own response, there was a decision to come in with a large-scale cash program, which to date has assisted about 300,000 people out of the 1.4 million that you referenced, Trudy. And a lot of that funding comes from the generous contributions of our friends in Australia. So that's important to note at the outset. Now, at the same time, I would be remiss not to really emphasize the exemplary role that Poland played. It really took a leading role. And within a matter of weeks, it passed legislation in line with a decision from the European Union in Brussels to provide people with temporary protection for 18 months. At the same time, the authorities here started to register people into the social security system, which allowed them to have access to education, to healthcare, to work. Really extraordinary in a very short period of time. At the same time, however, the needs were tremendous. And so as things continued to evolve, Unhcr ramped up our work on the protection front, on the rights front, particularly looking at women and children and a lot of the vulnerabilities that we were observing as people were crossing the border and settling here in Poland. And if you fast forward to today, the cash program has really scaled down and is much more targeted. And a lot of our focus is really on three things. The first thing is continuing to engage and monitor what's happening on the border with Ukraine. This is the gateway in many ways to the EU, where we see ongoing movements of people into Poland, but also movements back in some instances to Ukraine. You have some pendular movements, in part because some people live, in the West, for example, where it's comparatively peaceful and there's historic connections between the two countries. But at the same time, with the onset of winter and ongoing conflict, we have to be ready for another potential influx of people. So a lot of focus on that border area. And then the second thing that we are putting a lot of energy into with partners, with civil society, is reaching out to and connecting with the refugee community, and particularly the most at risk. Those who may be in the shadows, maybe who have not fully accessed all the benefits that are here in Poland, and really trying to assist them to benefit from what the government has generously provided, but also in some instances where complementary support is needed, be it psychosocial support for trauma that people have faced, counseling services, looking at services for children who may be unaccompanied or separated. women who, again, form the vast majority of the refugees with children and the special needs that they have. And then the last piece, and I'll maybe conclude it here, Trudy, and turn it back over to you, is what we would call the inclusion piece. So how do we not just provide that initial immediate protection and assistance, but try to make sure that people are as included as possible in Polish society and have access to jobs, for example, trying to facilitate that. With the private sector, there's a very robust economy here. You have a high inflation rate, it's around 16, 17%, but the unemployment rate is low, it's around 3%, and there are a lot of jobs, there's a lot of opportunities. So trying to do what we can to catalyze and facilitate some of that inclusion in the Polish economy and Polish society. Knowing that one of the biggest challenges that a lot of people face is childcare. I mentioned, over 90% women and children. There are a lot of jobs and a lot of people are working, a lot of women are working, but childcare remains a big issue and one which we continue to try to explore options with the government and others to find solutions. So that's kind of a big picture of where we're at now, and I know we'll get into more detail as we progress, Trudy. So back to you in Krakow.
Thanks, Kevin. I think that was a really great overview of the work that UNHCR is doing, and I've had the opportunity to actually see all of those different elements at work over the last few days, which has been fantastic. Just quickly, we've got a question from Brett Osler talking about the accommodation situation in Krakow and also in Warsaw. I know it's the same, that there's real challenges with getting for Ukrainians to get accommodation. And the question is, how does UNHCR help to improve the housing situation for those displaced in Poland? And what is being done for social supports and networks? I don't know if you would be able to answer that for Brett.
Brett asked a very good question, and it's a difficult question. I think this may be one of the most pressing issues that we're collectively facing, the issue of accommodation. I mentioned the inflation rate. At the same time, with this influx of over 1.4 million Ukrainians, the housing market is under a lot of stress, and the price of housing has skyrocketed in the last year. So finding affordable housing is a huge challenge, and I have to be very, very honest. How much UNHCR can do in that ambit is somewhat constrained. A lot of this relates to urban planning, housing policy, the lack of housing. But we are partnering with actors who are involved in this sector, and we hope to continue working, for example, with Habitat for Humanity, who has different programs to look at low-income housing schemes and also try to assess vacant buildings which are actually not occupied that could be refurbished. These aren't necessarily things that UNHCR would do, but that we can advocate for and that the government and others can put funding into. Another aspect of this, if you look at the other side of the coin, is there's a big issue still with people residing in collective centers. And in addition to that, people residing in the homes of Polish people who have incredibly received hundreds of thousands of refugees into their own private homes, receiving relatively modest subsidies, amounts of money to offset expenses from the government for up to 4 months. But this is not a sustainable solution. So Brett, we could spend an hour on this topic, and there's a lot we would need to unpack, and there's a lot of challenges and frankly not a lot of easy answers on this. But suffice it to say that we're engaged in this issue. We're also working with the government, of course, most closely on it in terms of some of the policies that we hope to advocate for, to look at low-income housing schemes, subsidized housing schemes. But another part of this is jobs. As much as we can, empower refugees to find work, the whole economic inclusion aspect of things, the more they will be able to enter into apartments or to enter into lease agreements. But this is a huge challenge, and it's one where we can do work to an extent, but we have to very much work with others. And I think our role is in many ways catalytic and more kind of focused on advocacy and policy work.
Thanks, Kevin. And yesterday in Krakow, at the train station, I was able to see the Blue Dot services there, and could see that there are people actively helping Ukrainian refugees with trying to find accommodation, or in the short term or medium term as well. So there are practical things happening, and I also saw emergency, transit accommodation at Krakow train station for people within the first 24 to 48 hours. So there's a lot being done, but it's a very challenging situation with such a high number of people coming through, as you say, Kevin. So the issue that I'm hearing a lot about now is the challenges that winter poses for refugees and displaced people. And, throughout Europe, we're hearing about the cost of heating that's going to increase significantly over this coming winter. So we're very interested in how to help the vulnerable people, the refugees from Ukraine and the refugee hosting countries like Poland. And to give us an idea of what refugees are facing in Ukraine, we have a short video to play from UNHCR's representative in Ukraine, Carolina Lindholm. So we'll just play that now.
Since the start of the war against Ukraine in February, almost 14 million people have fled their homes in search of safety, and more than 800,000 families have had their homes destroyed or damaged in missile attacks and shelling. Valentina, 75 years old, who lives alone, is one of many people who had the windows, the roof, the walls in her house damaged when the area she lives in outside Kiev was targeted back in March this year.
Холодно, це ще у березні місяці. Я спала в шубі, в у шапці, все. Да, було, по ночам було до -8, до -7. Холодно було. Я вже багато такі років прожила. В голові не вкладається. Як так можна? Як так можна? За що? За що?
Light and medium repairs of homes, like Valentina's, is one of UNHCR's contributions to the collective response to the impact of the war on people's lives and homes. As part of our winterization response, UNHCR is working to assist more than 8,000 families with repairs and insulation of damaged homes, as temperatures can plummet below -20 degrees in winter. This work is ongoing, and we're racing with time as the winter does not wait.
The needs across Ukraine are enormous, especially with the winter coming, and this requires a collective response, effectively led by the government and supported by its authorities, financial institutions, donor countries, private sector, civil society, and humanitarian actors, so people like Valentina can have a warm home to live in during the winter.
So Kevin, I'll come back to you. Are you able to describe for us what winters are like in this part of the country and of the world, and tell us more about the challenges that refugees face, not just in Ukraine, but in Poland as well?
Yeah, well, it can get quite cold, and I think my colleague Carolina mentioned it can get -20 degrees Celsius in parts of Ukraine. It can also get quite cold here in Poland. I'm originally from Colorado, and I'm used to the cold, but I can tell you, having been here in the past and here now, it's quite cold. So, I mean, this is a real issue. The cost of heating, as you mentioned, Trudy, is a major issue, both in Ukraine and in Poland. I think the video and the comments from my colleague Karolina show very well the situation in Ukraine and what we're trying to do. On this side of the border, when refugees are able to cross, one of the things that we're doing is working with the authorities to winterize or to improve insulation, heating systems in some of these collective accommodation centers for when people initially arrive. And we're reinforcing those efforts now with partners, given the potential of the new influx caused by the winter, focusing very much on the border regions and where we have these transit and reception centers. And part of the work here also is very practical, buying blankets, sleeping bags for some of these initial transit centers, and even working with the private sector and partners like Uniqlo, for example, that have donated winter clothing that children can wear in the cold weather here. It's also worth noting, Trudy, that this is not just a problem that we face in Ukraine and in Poland. You mentioned earlier that I have worked in Afghanistan in the past, for example, and I know that a lot of the folks on the line have been supporters of the situation in Afghanistan, another country of several where winter is a big issue. So the type of contributions that people make to UNHCR and Australia for UNHCR in the context of winterization is critical, not just here, but also more broadly speaking. I think Karolina mentioned that the winter doesn't wait, but the winter also doesn't only stay in certain countries. It's in a lot of countries, and there are forcibly displaced people, unfortunately, in a number of those places. And so this is a real need across many parts of the globe, especially in the north, of course. Over to you.
Thanks, Kevin. And could you just give us a bit of an overview of how UNHCR is gearing up for winter with the people who are refugees in Poland? What are some of the practical?
Yeah, one of the things that we're doing as part of this regional refugee response plan, which is an interagency plan that includes other UN agencies, other NGO actors, of course, it's done in collaboration with the government, is to ramp up support. And part of that relates to cash, very targeted cash for some of the most vulnerable who may need that assistance during the winter months. Another aspect of that relates to the renovation of facilities, insulation of facilities. It could be something as simple as putting in double pane glass in an accommodation center so that it retains the heat a bit better. Knowing the price of energy, which of course is beyond our remit and ability to control, we have to do everything that we can to try to mitigate the risks. And so that there's a whole range of things that the actors and partners are engaged in. But I think some of the key things relate to cash, relate to the winterization of certain collective facilities, and as much as we can, working with the authorities to try to find accommodation options for refugees. But we should make no mistake about it. This is a major challenge. This is something that is a challenge not just for refugees, but even for poor Poles who face a difficult winter. And we know all the reasons that the energy prices have skyrocketed. But this is a formidable challenge for Europe in general, and it's even more acute for the refugees.
And I think we have a question, and it pertains to is UNHCR, it's from Steve Curran, and it is UNHCR expecting further displacement from Ukraine, given the week that we've had in Ukraine, but also due to winterization, due to the winter?
It's a great question, and the question really hones in on the two elements that we think could drive more movements across the border. One is the winter in the situation in Ukraine, which is, I think, critical when it comes to energy and heating. And the second is the ongoing conflict. Now, of course, a lot of that's been focused in the east and the south, but as we saw in recent days, the conflict can spread across the entire country in a matter of seconds. And so it's still a very fluid situation, and we are quite engaged in contingency planning, preparedness work with the government and with partners, with particular focus on the border regions along the border of Ukraine, but also anticipating that once people cross, many of them will move onwards into Poland and beyond, into the European Union and other member states. So a lot of focus on contingency planning and on preparedness. As is always the case, we hope for the best, but we have to be prepared for the worst. And we just don't know how this is going to evolve. So we have to be prepared.
Thanks, Kevin. I might turn to Yulia now. So Yulia Gorbatova, as I mentioned earlier, Yulia has come from Odessa in Ukraine in February this year and is now in Poland. She currently works as an associate community-based protection officer for UNHCR, and she has previously led a team at excuse me, the Blue Dot Hub in Krakow, which provides vital services to refugees who have fled Ukraine, especially those who are most at risk or most vulnerable. So Yulia, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you take us back to when the war began in February? Where were you and how did you end up in Poland? And yesterday, I remember when we were speaking, you told me what your daughter said to you when you were in Odessa.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you for inviting me to tell my story. Though there were a lot of rumors about the wars coming, it was still unexpected and we were totally not prepared. We woke up at night because of explosions, and this was not that loud because this was our air defense working. And then I tried to pack the clothes quickly, to try to jump in the car and leave the country. But in half an hour, we saw in the news the huge traffic that was leading to the border. And my husband said that there is no chance to leave by car now. And we have to stay and find out another way to how to leave the country. Then the distance learning started, and then it was a huge explosion in the industrial area of the city. And my daughter was crying, running around the flat and crying, "Mommy, the war has come. Everybody told you that the war is coming and you did nothing and we are not safe here, we have to leave." And she was in panic. And at that moment, I understood that there is nothing else to do but to leave the country in any possible way. I quickly bought the train tickets because a couple of years ago, my daughter was in Krakow from the music festival, and I just knew the route. Then it was very simple from Odessa to Lviv, from Lviv to Przemysl, and from Przemysl to Krakow. So the earliest available tickets were in 3 days. And these were difficult 3 days. I was thinking, my husband wasn't joining me actually because he was not allowed. And in any case, he didn't want to flee. And I was thinking, what can I take with me? I wanted to take all the paintings of my daughters, but I can't take anyone. And I was just taking one pair of everything. And these were really small suitcases because my youngest son is 4. And yeah, I have to care about children, not about the suitcases. And then we were in the train. The first part was quite safe and easy. But when we arrived to Lviv, it was totally unexpected. I thought that I have the tickets to the simple train, but I learned that the trains were cancelled. And there were only evacuation trains without any tickets. And you had just to stand in the crowd and to get in the train in some unknown way. And it was terrible. And even at some point, I thought that I won't make it because being in the crowd with 2 children is dangerous itself. And then I was lucky. My daughter's music teacher was with us. And she told me, don't worry, we will make it, we will definitely make it. And then the crowd was organized. It was announced that we are making 2 small steps and then we stop, and then 2 small steps and then we stop. And in this way, we gradually entered the train. And another unexpected thing, the road actually took from 2 to 4 hours, depending on the border passage. It took 15 instead of that. And it was quite a simple train without heating, without anything. It was at night. And thanks to volunteers that provided us with the hot food for children, with the blankets for children, with everything we were not prepared for. And then we appeared in Poland, and first thing I remember I heard was, you are now safe, don't worry, everything will be all right. And this calmed down us, really. And they were very welcoming, the tea was waiting, the courts were waiting, they were directing us where to go, what train to pick up, depending on where we were heading. And then I remember I felt a deep relief when I was finally in the train from Przemysl to Krakow. I felt really safe, and I felt that my children are safe now. And yeah, we arrived to Krakow. My parents arrived a couple of days later. And then we understood that we will stay in Poland because the response of Polish government and Polish people was enormous. The access to the health services, my father had to go to hospital, and it was just as easy as coming to hospital, showing the passport with the stamp of crossing the border after the 24th and receiving all the services for free. And also the accessibility to work, to education. Yeah. And then I was lucky to become part of the UNHCR team when UNHCR opened the Cash Enrollment Center and the Blue Dot Center. And it was an extraordinary response and also very quick. And we were seeing a lot of people on a daily basis, like more than 1,000 coming every day. And for most of them, we were the first stop they turned to, being in another country. And apart from only providing the cash, we were providing the pathways where to turn for the medical services, for psychosocial services. And we were guiding those people because when you're alone, most of them mothers with children or elderly people. And when you're alone in the unknown country, you're just afraid of everything. Yeah, and I remember a lady that her child has the developmental detention. And she was afraid to show anybody this detention. And it took us several hours to convince her to go to the psychological support, psychosocial support. And then the psychologist guided her on the abilities Poland may give her about care about her child. She was impressed and she left us happy. And yeah, and that can make you cry from happiness.
Yeah. It must, Yulia, that's an incredible story, but it must be feel like full circle that now you can help fellow Ukrainians in, a really difficult situation. And I was able to see the Blue Dot centres, and I actually did see a lady that for people in transit, they provide some food and water and that sort of thing. And I saw a lady in tears hugging one of the workers there, just so appreciative of what, is happening. And also seeing the work that's happening for children and the legal, helping people be able to navigate the system in Poland, which is different to what they're used to in Ukraine. So how important do you think these hubs are for vulnerable groups, like refugees and, they do an incredible job, don't they?
Yeah, indeed. It's extremely important to gather all the help in one place. And then, yeah.
That's Krakow. That's in Warsaw, I think, that one.
Yeah, that's in Warsaw. And it's extremely friendly place where you can indeed leave your children with the nurses and spend as much time as you need to leave encouraged that you are able to get everything, every support you can, every support you may need. So the legal advice, the psychological support, which is the most important. From the registration center, we referred many of the refugees to the psychologist, and she helped a lot. And the social workers on guiding, showing the routes to the kindergartens, showing the routes to school, and giving the numbers of the doctors who speak Ukrainian or Russian, because the major problem is the language barrier, right? Because you may call the number, but you don't know what to say, how to say in Polish. Yeah, and we had a huge queues there, yeah, to the workers, and everybody left with a smile, and they really needed that help, not less than the cash service.
And we've got a question there that is asking about how, that there are jobs that are readily available, but the language challenges. And I don't know if you can talk about those, Yulia, just being able to speak Polish and how important that is for certain jobs.
The Polish language is quite similar to Ukrainian, and you can understand what Polish people say. And if Polish people would like to, they can also understand you. It's quite easily learned on the very basics, And then there are a lot of Polish classes organized, and this is very important, really. Yeah, for the certain jobs, it may be a barrier, but not the major, I believe.
Okay. I met a woman, and we might see a photo of her, Julia, who is an engineer in Ukraine, but because childcare that's Julia. Because childcare is challenging, but also because her Polish isn't as good as is needed at that technical level for that role. What she's able to do is cleaning at the moment, and her story was also quite incredible. So we might talk a bit now, thanks Yulia, about providing cash assistance. And I've certainly seen on Monday, I was in Warsaw and saw the cash assistance service being ramped up now again to help people, those most vulnerable through winter. So I'll come to you, Kevin, and just could you just, I think cash assistance has played a really vital role in this sort of urban displacement setting. Can you talk to us about why cash assistance has been so important?
Yeah, thanks, Trudy. And, before I enter into the cash issue, I just really want to say how happy I am to see colleagues like Yulia, who are part of the team, because a lot of times people think about people who were forced to flee and, refugees being vulnerable and not able to, engage and contribute. But Yulia is an example of exactly, the kind of resources and capacity and knowledge that we need as Unhcr, and that I'm sure is making such an impact. So we have a lot of colleagues who are Ukrainian, of course, also Polish, who are part of the team, the Unhcr team. And this is one of the things that I think makes me most hopeful about our response here is that we have colleagues like Yulia who are with us and who are also helping to guide us with the community and to reach out. So I'm really glad to see Yulia on the call. And it's also, I think if I have it right, Yulia, you also worked in cash enrollment. So you've been working at one of these blue dots, but you were working in the cash enrollment process. So maybe to talk just a little bit about that. So in the early days of the emergency, I mentioned that we saw there was going to be a need for some immediate cash assistance, in no small part because of the demographics. You had over 90% of the people crossing the border who were women with children. So there was an immediate assumption that people were going to need some help. A lot of people had nothing but the suitcases they were carrying. We entered into an agreement with Banco Santander, a Spanish bank, within just a couple of weeks of the outbreak of the crisis on 24 February. And I won't walk you through all the technical aspects of it, but suffice it to say that there is a quite sophisticated system by which you register, you go through a screening process, there's biometrics involved to make sure that there's not duplication, that the right people get the money, information is taken, to make sure that we're able to reach the right people. And at the end of that process, you get a number on your mobile phone. So I'm not very sophisticated, but you get this number on your phone, and then you can go to any ATM in the country and you punch that code in, and you get the cash without having to open a bank account. It's around $150 per person in 3 different installments. And that doesn't sound like a lot, and in the larger scheme of things, of course, it can't cover all the needs, but it can cover those immediate basic needs like food, medication, clothing, things that people may not have been able to bring with them that are necessities, basic hygiene products, personal products. And the reason that cash really is such a good tool is it allows people to choose what they need. One thing that's clear in a context like Poland, this isn't Afghanistan, this isn't Pakistan, this isn't some of the deep field locations where we work, where perhaps a tent or plastic sheeting or a jerry can to carry water, other kind of core relief items, as we call them in Unhcr, may be indicated. In the context of Poland, that just wasn't going to work. So we knew that cash really was the quickest tool, the tool that gave refugees the freedom to choose what is it that I need. A mother can decide what she needs for the family, for the kids. So it's really been something that's worked quite well here. As I mentioned earlier, about 300,000 people have been reached through that program. And one last thing I'll say, one of the key people who was working on this project was a guy named Mike Clayton, who is a fellow Australian. So another shout out to Australia. Back to you, Trudy.
Thanks, Kevin. And I had the great privilege to meet with Mike on Monday, and he took me through the program that he set up, and it's very innovative. Actually, it's something that Unhcr can be proud of, and it happened very quickly and was it sort of, as you said, Kevin, it played that role between people's immediate needs and before the Polish government could step in, which is really vital. It's a very important program, and I think for many of our donors and supporters, it's great for us to know that we've been able to provide those essential needs for people, and for particularly the most vulnerable people. Kevin, one of the things that I've seen is there's talk of that pendular movement between Poland and Ukraine, so people coming back and forth. And one of the things when we were in the community centre yesterday in Krakow, many people felt that this would be, I think there's some shock that this has gone on and it's now at 8 months, and there were many people who were looking at 1st of September going back to Ukraine to start the school year with their children. And yeah, so can you just sort of talk to us a little bit about that movement between Poland and Ukraine?
Yeah, I mean, this is a complex issue. I mean, essentially, you have a border that is open, and so Ukrainian citizens are able to enter and to go back and forth. Initially, there was around 6 million people that crossed the border, but over the course of the last several months, The border guards here estimate that up to 2 million people may have kind of circled back and forth. Now, that does not mean, of course, that all areas of Ukraine are safe and that people are necessarily going back to all parts of Ukraine. But historically, there's been a lot of commerce, a lot of movement of people and goods between the two countries. And so that naturally, continues in some way. But the vast majority of people who we have reached out to through different surveys, both in Poland, but throughout the European Union, have told us that, like most refugees across the globe, people want to go back home, but I think that the vast majority still don't think it's the time yet to do that because the situation is so fluid. And so at this point, we're really trying to make sure that we're monitoring what's happening, and that if people, do go back and they need to come back to Poland again, that they're able to do that. So engaging with the authorities to make sure that flexibility exists. There are some instances where people may have family across the border, and perhaps a family member didn't want to come to Poland, and so there may be some back and forth movement that's occurring. One thing that's also worth noting is just the other day, the European Union extended this temporary protection directive by another 6 months. So now it will be a full 24 months since 24 February. And I suspect that Poland will adopt that extension as well. That's an indication of the fact that things still are not stable and not safe in many parts of Ukraine. And it's certainly the position of UNHCR that this is not a time when we would be facilitating returns, but of course people have the right to choose to go back if they want to do so. And our role is really to keep an eye on things on the border and to be monitoring things. And I think as things progress going forward, to make sure that people have the information that they need to make an informed decision, with the caveat that people often know much more than we do. So Yulia and her family and friends are going to know, a lot of what's going on in ways that we won't. But that's why it's really important for us to maintain that connection with the community and to be consulting and understanding what is a very fluid and complex dynamic.
Thanks, Kevin. And Yulia, from a personal perspective, what is it like being away from your country for so long? And I guess also, what does it mean to be able to help fellow Ukrainians, in Poland?
For sure, it's it's very difficult staying away from home for such a long period, and especially considering that my husband, as like many others, they are in Ukraine and children don't see their fathers. And it's difficult, though we try to communicate on the video connection, like every evening. Still, it's not the same, you cannot have. And every morning you start from reading the news. And every day you are worried about what this day brings. And this uncertainty about the future. It's very welcoming here in Poland, but you are not certain about the next day in any case. And maybe this distance and the uncertainty are the major difficulties that you suffer. But you are right. The feeling of helping each other, of helping your country citizens, right? It helps you to survive. It helps you to feel happy, and it helps you to feel the meaning of life. You are helping, and that brings a lot to your life. That's actually the sense of life.
I think that for me, some of my takeaways, it's been such a privilege to meet Ukrainian refugees and to be able to speak to them, to see, I think this week has been particularly hard for a lot of refugees, and just seeing at times that uncertainty in their eyes, and I think identifying that it is very difficult, like everybody wants to be in your own home, and hearing, I spoke to Julia, who was saying, in Mariupol, she had her own house, her parents had their own house, they had a really good life, she had her job, and now they're all together, you know, in a sort of a small flat in Poland, which they're very grateful for. But it feels like they're just starting over from nothing. And I think also just people talking about the uncertainty, you know, as you say, Yulia, day to day, just not sure what's happening. But I also see this great resolve in Ukrainian refugees that they will go home, and that's their great aim, and it's really inspiring. Yesterday, I was also at the community centre with Yulia, and there were some older Ukrainian women who were there for, it's like supporting each other because they're going through very similar circumstances. And they were doing some meditation and helping with anxiety, as well as doing some painting to sort of try to, in another way, that's a form of meditation, I guess. And it was, I think it just provides them, you know, with other people and being able to support each other in, because they're going through the same things. I spoke with Irina, who came from Mariupol as well, and Irina's in her 60s, and she came just with her mother, who was 84 and is very unwell, and just was telling me about the real challenges in being able to escape with somebody who is very unwell and older. And I think, you know, it's really hit home for me that because women and children, it's over 90%, are the ones that have come over the border to seek refuge, and just the real challenges for women alone. Even if they want to work, trying to get childcare has been a big issue. But I also heard some really positive stories around, I met a woman who's going through cancer treatment, and she's been able to access that and continue her treatment in Poland, and another lady who had an eye problem, and another lady who had a lung condition. And they are just so grateful for what they're able to access in Poland. So it's been a real eye-opener for me to be here, and it's been really wonderful to see the work that my Unhcr colleagues are doing on the ground every day to try to make lives better for Ukrainian refugees. So it has been fantastic to see. And I think I was able to speak to people and to let them know that Australians are there supporting them as well, and trying really hard to, you know, support in every way possible. And we've seen that in Australia from our regular donors, our individual donors. Corporate Australia has been amazing as well, and foundations. So thank you to everybody for your support. So UNHCR's work is ongoing. We don't know when this situation is finishing. Australia for UNHCR is working on a campaign for winterisation and to help people in these really difficult circumstances. And as Kevin says, it's not just in Ukraine that these situations are. We are also focused on Afghanistan and helping Syrian refugees who continue to face really difficult circumstances. Kevin, I'm wondering, is there anything else that you would like to say at this stage?
I think really just a word of thanks to everyone who's online and spent some time with us. And also my personal commitment, and I think the commitment of our team, to use whatever resources are generously given in the best possible way. I say this to government donors, but especially to individual donors. We take those contributions very seriously, and we work very hard to use them to maximum effect, so we can really maximize, those resources. There's a lot of challenges still in Ukraine in particular. Here it's a bit easier, but here as well, a lot of challenges. So, we don't always have all the answers. We have to work with others. We have to work with the government, but especially we have to work with the community. And again, that's why I'm so happy that we have.
Oh, you're muted, Kevin.
Sorry, did I just go on mute just now?
Yes, you did. But
sorry.
you were just,
No, the last thing I was just going to say is, there's a lot of challenges, and so we have to work with a lot of different actors to take those on. And one of the key stakeholders, of course, is the government and our partners, but it's also the refugee community. And that's why I'm really so happy again to see Yulia with us on this call, because she's part of the solution. So that's why we're here, to work together to try to find solutions. And I can assure you that we'll use whatever money people may contribute to the best possible effect we can.
And Yulia, is there anything that you'd like to say?
I would like to thank everybody for your participation in our crisis, because it's very important. When we feel the support from all over the world, we feel that we may overcome this.
Mm. So I would like to just say thanks to everybody who's asked questions. I've tried to get to as many as possible today. Thank you so much for joining us today as well. A big thank you to Kevin Allen and Yulia for being here today and sharing your incredible insights into the situation. We really appreciate that, and we will be going out to our donors to ask for support for helping with winterization in Ukraine, Afghanistan, and for Syrian refugees as well. So thanks very much to everybody for joining us today. It's very much appreciated. Thank you.